What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Boardroom Podcast, where we help you stay calm, change lives, and have business on your terms. I am super excited because I get to have an incredible guest with me, Brooke. She is an absolute weapon. Don't let her feminine demeanor. She looks very kind and innocent. She's an absolute sales weapon. So she runs a company called She Sells, and website if you want to check them out, shesells.online. And Brooke, you've been selling for how long now? How long have you been in sales?
5 years, 5 years fully in sales. Yeah. I've dabbled in sales throughout my professional career, but 5 years where I've just gone all in.
Yeah. And over those 5 years, how much have you sold in high ticket online fitness packages?
So over 8 million in revenue.
That's $8 million in high ticket online fitness sales, which anyone who's listening, if you've done fitness sales, you know is hands down the hardest type of sales to be doing, mainly because in order to make a ton of money in fitness sales, it's volume, right? So you have to get good at having conversations, connecting with people emotionally, and you're not doing it for the enormous amount of sales commission. So it has to be kind of like a passion, right? And then you start earning through the volume. So it requires you to eat shit. That's the best way to kind of put it.
I love that. Embrace the suck.
100%. So, were you always in sales? You said full-time 5 years. What's your background?
So I'm a primary school teacher, and I always found that sales would find me in some capacity. So the moment for me was when I was sitting on the classroom floor with my year 2 kids, and I was reading them a book, and I had memorized the book. I knew the next page, I knew the page after that, I knew the activity that we're going to do, I knew what was going to happen in the afternoon. And in that moment, I just stopped and thought, oh my goodness, this is it for the next 30 years of my professional life. Yeah. I'm going to be doing the same thing over and over and over again, on repeat. And that scared the shit out of me because I've always had this fear of living an average life. I didn't want that for myself. I didn't want to just go to uni, get a degree, go and work as a teacher, buy a house, have kids, and that be it.
Yeah.
I just didn't want that for myself. So that sort of kick-started my looking for an avenue that I could earn, become financially free, work from home, have the time freedom, location freedom to work from anywhere in the world. Yeah. And I entered network marketing as a beginning sort of start point for myself. And I did really well. Yeah. I did really, really, really well. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just talking to people, maybe
just
talking too much.
Talking to people and connecting with them. And then they're like, I would buy whatever you're trying to give me. I just want to
where's the dotted line? Stop talking. Yeah. But I got flown to San Diego for this big conference, and I got an award for becoming the fastest crystal executive or I can't remember. Yeah. It was so long ago. But that sort of was the start of me going, ooh, okay, sales is cool. You can make a lot of money in sales. I'm good at it. Well, that's what I thought. That's what I told myself I was good at it. And then I just kind of realized the way I was selling, the way I was talking to people, how much I let it consume me was changing who I was. And I was losing friends. And my family had even said to me, Brooke, come on, are you still in there?
Yeah.
And I won an award to be mentored by one of the top millionaires in the company. And she had bought me flights to come to Dallas. And the day before I was meant to fly out, I told her I wasn't coming. And she said to me, you'll never, ever come back from this. And I didn't. I quit. In that moment, I was like, nope, sales isn't for me. This is too much pressure. I'm changing. I'm losing friends. And I guess that reinforced the whole idea in my mind that sales is icky, manipulative, So for a long time, I was like, no, sales is bad. That's what I told myself. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was sort of my intro into it.
I kind of want to unpack that because a lot of people have that kind of feeling when it comes to sales, and I've learned, really sales is the highest level of service that you can provide initially because you're creating transformations, you're shifting people's entire identities and things like that, and you're serving at a really high level. So how did you go from not wanting to do anything with sales to producing over 8 million in sales, right? That's a pretty radical shift.
Transformation, yeah. So I like I said, I kept feeling like sales kept finding me in some capacity. So I said no to the network marketing. I stopped all of that. I then went back to teaching. Teaching's my safety net. It's the rope that I've had around me for so long because I feel safe. I know if I'm in the classroom, I'm earning 80K a year. I know what I'm getting every single month. And you know what they say, the two most deadly things in the world is a monthly salary and heroin. So I didn't have to worry about the heroin, but the monthly salary was like ropes around me. But again, it got to the point where I was like, what am I doing? Like, is this it for me? And I went into tobacco sales. I don't know why.
Tobacco
Sales. So I was literally like door to door, basically. I had a territory that I was looking after, and I would go in and I would basically persuade or convince the shop owners to buy more cigarettes, to try the new ones that we have. But I wasn't allowed to advertise that, obviously. We had like blank walls, like there was all this strategy around where we were going to place, like in terms of the pricing, like what it had to look like. So that was the first time that I was introduced to working with human behavior. There was certain traits, like if you like having the top one that you were trying to advertise at the same eye level as the person buying it, because it was, triggering a certain response in their mind. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. So I hated what I was selling. I absolutely hated what I was selling. And I genuinely felt like that's not where I was meant to be. But the lesson that I took from that was that, okay, there's more depth to sales than I'm actually aware of.
Yeah, it's a real, there's a lot of science to it. Right? It's like sales is like a science and an art, right? Where there's some art to it, but then it's like there are like pattern recognitions, where there's like very consistent patterns that you can learn, identify, and just like put on repeat, So going from tobacco sales, how'd you get into fitness sales? Like how did that transition? So you go from selling people poison to helping people transform. There's no in between with you. There's no in between with you. You go from
I actually requested to get in my boot, because like I obviously had stacks and stacks and stacks of cigarettes, and I was so embarrassed to drive around with like all these cigarettes in my boot. Not to mention it's dangerous. People want that. So I requested to have a car that literally covered my boot so that no one could see what was in there, because I was ashamed. Like I would never tell anybody that I was in sales doing that at all. And so then obviously quickly I started to realize, like, I don't want to be in this industry. Like I was dominating, like my territory was number one. And again, I was like, okay, there's something that I'm good at here. I just don't really know what it is, because all I'm doing is talking. That's it. I had no strategy, no process. I would just be connecting with these business owners, these, humans, and they were kind of doing what I told them or asked them to do. So eventually I ended up being like, nah, back to teaching it is for me. So again, leave sales, go back to teaching. And my now husband, he had started working as a PT, and I just looked at his hours and was like, he's just living the life. He'd get up at 4, be done by 7:30, have the entire day right up until 3:00, and then work a little bit in the afternoon, and then come home and his day's done. And he wasn't earning very much, like he wasn't earning much less than what I was on. So I was kind of like, what am I doing? So I really worked hard. I studied to become a PT. I was able to do that in less than 3 months. And then I was like right into the gym scene. So I fully jumped into the fitness space. I'd always been passionate about looking after myself, and I'd been at the gym that he was actually working at for a long time. So I felt like I knew a little bit. I was passionate about it. So then when I fully stepped into it, I was like, okay, this is where I want to be.
Yeah.
And obviously, as a PT, there's an element of sales. Like I had to sell a certain amount of 28-day challenges, and then I had to convert those 28-day challenges to 16-week transformations. And very quickly, I realized that I'm good at this. I can do this. So I was the top in the whole company, which was Australia wide. I was the one, I had sold the most amount of paid in fulls. We won multiple competitions in our gym for like fast start competitions. So who can collect the most cash. And when the business owner said to me, hey, can you run some sales training? Like, what are you doing? I was like,
no idea.
I don't know. No idea. No idea. I mean, I can talk to everybody, but I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know. So yeah, that's sort of how I got into the fitness space. And then we were moved to Sydney and I met that's where my eyes really opened up to sales. So I worked alongside Matt Ryder
Oh, you
in the
worked with
gym
Matt
scene.
Ryder?
I
Okay.
did.
Small world.
Yeah. So when he first started Sales Sniper, Scott and I were two of the people that he wanted us to come and work with. And we did for a little bit when it was in the gym, when he was sort of selling 28-day challenges for gyms. Like we were working alongside him. Well, we're working with him for that. But again, I was the ropes of like having that security. It just kept pulling me down. And what an opportunity that I could have actually had with Matt that we actually turned down in the end to go back to Perth and I start working as a teacher again.
Dang.
So, yeah.
Okay. So when did you start getting like really good sales training? Because it seems like you just had a natural knack for connecting and just communicating, so natural, like really, especially as a teacher and you're dealing with children, right? So your emotional intelligence is pretty high and your ability to like come down to their level and connect with them and make them feel like you're with them, it's a good solid foundation for just interpersonal communication.
Totally. Absolutely. I guess where I started to have my eyes opened to sales training was with Matt.
Mm-hmm.
So we sold a program which he ran training for. So that's really when I started to be like, oh, there's a process. Oh, there's a script. Oh, hang on. I've got to do this with my voice. There was just so many things that I started becoming exposed to. And just as I started to get good, like as in good with my process and like sharpening my skill set and actually learning about it, was when we decided to come back to Perth, which is where we're from. And I went back to teaching and Scott went on the mines, and that was it. We were like, we're so done with anything to do with like sales, fitness. Like we just need some stability, is what we told us. And then I was called by one of my friends who we lived with in Melbourne. And he was like, Brooke, I have an opportunity. I just need you to like, please just meet the business owner. I know you're done with sales. I know you're done with like the fitness space, but please, like I'm earning $25K a month and I'm just speaking to people on the phone. And I was like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a scam. Absolutely not. And there was a part of me that I just was so intrigued. Like I always say yes to things. And that's been a big part of who I am. I always say yes to opportunities because I believe if regrets only come from, not exploring something.
Mm-hmm.
So I met with the business owner and which was Andrew Polton, and he walked me through everything and he showed me the stats and he showed me like how much people were making on the team. And I just thought,
what the hell?
What the hell? Exactly. What the hell? And so I jumped in, but when you have a vision and the people closest to you can't see that vision. I had, just recently I went to an event and one of the speakers, the keynote speakers, he spoke about not sharing your vision with non-visionaries and don't share your dream with non-dreamers. And I'd shared it with my mom and my husband, and I was just telling everybody who would listen about it. And they were like, Brooke, what are you doing? Like, you've just got a really good job at a really good school. There's finally some like stability. Like, you're being silly. Like, stop, just focus.
Yeah.
And I could have either let them, dictate the decisions that I made, but I was just so wanting to prove to myself that sales is exactly where I'm meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I ignored all of that noise and I jumped in, and in the first 2 weeks, I was almost fired. Literally. Almost fired. Well, I just hadn't sold anybody. After my first shift, I remember coming in and my husband was like, how did you go? And I was like, oh, so good. Everyone said they're going to call me back tomorrow and sign up.
Oh,
and he
rookie.
was like,
rookie.
And he was like, okay, well, yeah, hopefully they all ring you. And I'm like, they're going to ring me. Like, stop putting me down. Not one single person.
No one calls you back. No one calls you back.
So that was a good lesson. I was like, okay, turns out talking to people isn't enough anymore. Turns out being their best friend isn't working here. And so I kept just doing what I knew. And in 2 weeks, I think I'd made like 1 or 2 sales. And so I got a very abrupt voice note saying, if things don't improve in the next 2 weeks, like, you're cut.
Yeah.
And Iggy, when I tell you, I have never been fired from a job. Like I've always been the top performer. That's just who I am. I will do whatever it takes to be like a top performer.
Yeah.
And so when I got that message, I just immediately, now I could have gone into, woe is me, like, how dare he speak to me like that, blah, 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 blah. But I didn't. Instead, it lit a fire under my ass, really. And I started to be like, right, what am I not doing? Who is doing better than me? What do I need to learn? And I just became obsessed with sales.
Yeah. That's awesome. We call those coming to Jesus moments. I thoroughly
I love that.
I'm like, listen, if I need to check someone, I'm like, I need to have a coming to Jesus talk with this person. So it sounds like AP had a coming to Jesus moment with you and lit you up. So once you made that shift, what are the things that you're like started realizing that you weren't doing? Because you were in an environment where like what your natural charisma wasn't working, because 80% of like the communication is body language. So in person, your charisma is going to get them to like really follow through because they've seen you and they can't just ghost you, right? Because if you met them in person, you could probably find them again. So those calls you probably would have closed in person, but over the phone, what was like the difference between the in-person sales versus the phone sales?
Oh, it was, that's what I'm saying. I didn't understand why I wasn't having the same success that I had in my network marketing business and in my tobacco selling business. And even in the gym, I was like, why? Like I am good at sales. That's why I was, given this opportunity, but yet guys on the account were outperforming me. And we were selling to women. We were selling to women over 40. And there was literally like 5 fully grown men who were better than me. And I was like, okay, there is got to be something. No, like how is that possible? And so like, I just did a deep dive. I just started like listening to calls. I started learning from people who were better than me. I'd done sales training. I'd looked at NEPQ. I looked at so many things, maybe too many things, because then my brain was just like, I had completely removed myself from what I was doing. And I jumped into this whole new version of me, which felt really inauthentic. I was just using lines that I didn't like, that felt icky. It felt very masculine. But what I'd recognized is where I was lacking in skill was being able to lead my prospects through the process. I had no authority. I was just being their best friend.
Yeah.
I was like talking about their kids and I was like, oh, that's so beautiful. Like I was being too feminine and there wasn't enough parts there was no challenging, there was no leading, there was no authority.
Yeah.
There was none of that happening. So at the end, of course they're going to say no to me. Like I'm a friend. They're like, oh, thank you so much, Brooke. That was such a great conversation.
So
like I'm just going to yeah, it was so much fun. We should catch up for coffee. Dude, what? So yeah, I needed to find how to drop into my masculine more and lead my prospects. It's still a really beautiful way where I'm connecting with them, but I'm challenging them because I'm a change facilitator.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get them to understand like some of the things or the decisions that they're making is because of the perspective that they're in.
Yeah.
So I started to recognize, okay, how can I switch from feminine to masculine within my sales calls and still have that beautiful and meaningful interaction, but have the ability for them to say yes to me? And as soon as I unlocked that, it was game over.
Yeah. And I like you mentioned like you were a change facilitator. I was going to ask you like, what was that identity shift, kind of like the hat or the focus that you had to like come into that sales call with? Where I mean, you're not trying to be the best friend. You're trying to help them make a decision to transform their lives. Right.
Yeah. So that was the difference, Iggy. In all of my other roles as a salesperson, I was like, right, how am I going to make this sale? What am I going to do? What am I going to say? And so the shift happened for me when I started to realize that's not what I'm doing as a salesperson. I'm trying to see and determine if we can even help them. Is there a sale to be made?
Yeah.
That's coming from a place of service, right?
Yeah.
I am here to change their perspective, to get them to move forward, to take action. And a big thing for me is learning that it's not my responsibility whether they say yes or no. It's my responsibility to get them to see what needs to happen in order for them to go from A to B, to build that gap, to get them to recognize what the steps are to get to B. And once I did that, it was like, it just made sense. That was the next thing that they needed to do in order to start moving towards where they want to be.
That makes sense. So essentially transitioning to really being one, you have to like remove the outcome, right? You're not emotionally tied to whether or not to say yes or no, right? And coming with the frame, like, I just want to help you see what you need to do to get from point A to point B, and ultimately help you make a decision on what's going to be in your best interest, right?
Yeah.
And coming from that frame is really like the power of sales, right? So for somebody who's kind of like struggling or wanting to learn how to get better at sales, like, what are some like basic things that somebody can just like core fundamentals they can just start implementing just to start seeing improvements, even if they don't have like a sales trainer or anything like that?
Okay. Firstly, like, work on your mindset in understanding that. So remove the self. Like, the identity shift that happened for me was going from self to service. So if you come from a place of service, it immediately changes your interactions. Your questions change, like your tonality changes, because you're there to serve, not to sell. So you've removed that, right? So that's my first tip. The second one is recognizing that, really understanding when someone says build the gap, what that means. So rather than just hearing a bunch of words and then trying to implement them, going deeper and understanding the concept. So when I say build the gap, you got to think what happens. Like, you've got a homeostasis point, right? Now, when you're talking about pain and you're talking about like the problems, they dip below that homeostasis point. So there's lots of cortisol being released. They feel shit. They just don't feel like they're in pain, right? Of course, that's what happens when you talk about pain. So you dip below that. Now, what a lot of salespeople do is that's where they leave them. They leave them down here.
Yeah.
It's like, why do you want to do this? Oh, because like I can't continue being like, a mum who's not present with her kids. Like, I'm already struggling to XYZ. I really just want to be seen again. Pain.
And it just keeps
So do we think that someone's brain who's releasing cortisol, are they going to buy? No. So we can't keep them down here. We have to bring them above homeostasis, where there's serotonin, oxytocin flowing. They feel good. They can see. Your brain thinks in pictures, right? They need to be able to see a future where their pain is gone.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen a lot in the sales calls that I have reviewed. That building the gap, like that building the vision of what could happen if their pain was gone, doesn't happen. They go straight from pain, why, into, hey, I think what we could do could really help you.
Yeah.
And you've just left them down here.
Yeah.
So that is if you just change that, it will change things for you.
So you got to ultimately, I like to say, like, rub salt in the wound, like open up the wound a little bit, right? Put a little salt in it, but then you have to be able to actually, you have to actually let them experience what it's like when that wound goes away and it's healed, right? And then that delta is like what they're buying. They're buying the mechanism that whatever you're selling is going to take from them being in pain to ultimately get into their ideal outcome, right?
Yeah.
So building the gap, working on mindset. What else?
Oh, well, without giving away all my secrets, but I think, again, we got to understand human psychology in this, right? If their present pain doesn't outweigh, sorry, I've stuffed this up. If their like cost of not moving forward is not as great as the pain that they're in, they're not going to, why would they buy? There's no urgency. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They're happy to just continue to feel that, to stay in that pain. So you have to have a cost of inaction question. Like, what happens if you don't, after you've built them up really, really, really high, and they're like, I want that because, why is it a must? It's a must because I can notice the change in language. It's more positive than I can't, I struggle. There's a difference there. And then when you bring them back down to reality, because you're good, but you're not that good. We can't click our fingers and make that a reality. You have to do the work, right? Yeah. So let's flip things for a minute. Like, worst case scenario, let's say you don't change. Like, what happens then?
Yeah.
Right. So now what I'm trying to understand is, and the response that you get is always like, oh, I wouldn't let that happen.
Like, no. You're trying to avoid sitting in that pocket. No.
Yes. Okay. Hang on a minute. How can you be sure? Because, I mean, this is something dealing with for the last X amount of time. So what makes you so sure that you wouldn't let it get to that point? And that immediately makes them go, oh yeah, fuck, you're right. So, I would be miserable. I would be depressed. Like I know. And so all of a sudden now they're like, okay, in my brain, if I don't move forward, if I don't do something about this, that future is far worse than the pain I'm in right now.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden it starts to make sense because they're like, it's not a want anymore. I need to take action. Otherwise I am just step by step, day by day, moving towards that reality, which is not where I want to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you go from preschool to like primary school teacher. That's what you call it, right? In Australia. And here it's like preschool or kindergarten. So you go from being a teacher to network marketing to selling poison to the gym space. And then you eventually make the transition online. And that's where it seems like that's where you found like true passion for sales, right? Whereas like you were good at it before, but it was just kind of like raw, you were decent at it. Let's say that. It was just like raw, like unrefined talent, right?
Yes.
Or just a natural knack for just connecting with people. So now you're...
I was, the learning stages, like I was unconsciously incompetent, but that was working for me.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was doing, but I was working and, like the dip, right? So I was up here. And then when I started learning how to sell, I dropped down here because I started to get more process focused. And now I'm at that point where I'm, unconsciously competent. I can just do it without having to think too much. So that's the phases we go through. And you're always going to notice a dip when you start sales training because you're like, I should have gone there. I didn't do that. I didn't get this. You start to think of those things.
Yeah, you go from unconscious incompetence, which your ignorance is bliss, and you go from conscious incompetence. You realize that you suck.
Yeah.
Right? And then you're like transitioning to like conscious competence where you start building and eventually it goes unconscious. So you've taken a lot of sales calls. And when did you start making that transition to start providing like doing sales training?
So that's a good question. I obviously have always been a teacher. So coaching and teaching has something that comes very, very naturally to me. And also I love it. I love it. It fills up my cup. I feel like I am good at explaining concepts in a way that, people can conceptualize and actually understand. You know how sometimes you see a teacher or you get coached by someone and they just say a bunch of words and you're kind of like, oh my goodness, that sounds amazing. But what do I do?
It sounds really good, but it's like they kind of left you like, what do I do with my hands?
Yes. Yeah. It's like they can ride a bike, but you're still got the training wheels on, but you don't know how to get from no training wheels to like riding like that. There's no like practical application or implementation. So I was given an opportunity to jump on and assist with some coaching. And I was like, oh, okay. Like I think I'm at that point. So I'd been selling for 3 years on this account by that point. So I was top of the leaderboard. I knew I'd done some script reviews. Like I'd reworked a couple of things. So I knew that I had a much more solid foundation to go into sales calls. And I was nervous because I thought, oh gosh, what if I review a call and I don't know what they're doing wrong? Like I'd started to tell myself that I wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And as soon as I reviewed the call, I just that's actually what made me realize how good I had got at sales, because I was like, oh wow, there was none of this, there was none of that. This is what's happening. This is, and I just
were doing wrong immediately.
And it just lit me up and I was just on fire. And I had it was a full male team. So that was also a bit intimidating. I was coming in as a female selling on a fitness account and I was telling guys how to, change processes within their script to make more sales. And, at first they were kind of, I could just feel, I'm intuitive.
There's definitely like their ego was hurt a little bit,
For sure.
And if they're good at what they're doing, like they're going to have a little bit of ego. And then on top of that, like getting schooled by a woman in this space that you're like, that you feel you should be dominating in.
Yeah. I slapped them around. Don't you worry. They were selling to men who, their wives were going to leave them. They're really broken. They're looking to be empowered. And, I slapped them around because this is where they were lacking. They were lacking empathy. They were lacking empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
So to this day, I'm still full-time coaching on that account. And, I took the business from, not being profitable to being extremely, and not just me, of course, but I had a big role in taking it from, not earning any money to earning, they bring in hundreds and thousands of dollars per month now, which is amazing. I've worked with their sales team consistently, key word here. I didn't just come in and do a block of training. I've worked with them consistently daily on drilling the script, on breaking down concepts, on objection handling, on so many things that has just lifted their game. And you slowly have started to see them move through those stages of learning, which has been really amazing.
That's awesome. So you get to see firsthand. And that's cool. I think you actually get much better at the thing. Once you get really good at doing something, you experience an incredible lift in just competence when you start teaching it, right? Because then you're forcing yourself to identify and recreate those frameworks and processes that are creating the success. Mm-hmm. And you're essentially decoding it and creating processes around like making it repeatable, which in turn reinforces, oh yeah, that's why that works, right? And then you can start to identify that. So now transitioning into She Sells, tell us a little bit about that. I want to make sure we get some time to dive into She Sells. I completely spent this entire time just really, I find your background fascinating. So talk about She Sells and what you're doing there.
Yes. So as you've heard throughout my story, it's been very, I've been surrounded by a lot of males, and that's totally fine. I've learned from some of the most incredible salespeople in the world, but they're all men.
Yep.
And so, like I said, some of the things that I was learning, I just felt icky saying it. I felt very masculine. I felt inauthentic. And when I started working at, the fitness company that I was working at, and I started bringing in some of the feminine a little bit more, yes, I still needed to be masculine at times. But when I started to bring in that and remove some of the lines that was triggering sales resistance and start to really understand why that was happening, I just saw my conversion rate just skyrocketed. Like I literally at one point in my career, I was converting at like 75%.
Yeah.
That is so incredible in the fitness space, like 75%. And it truly was because I was being authentic. I was connecting with these people, but I was also leading them, and I was being that, that trusted advisor, but also coming from a place of service and empathy. And so I started to realize, why aren't there more women doing this? Like the freedom that it's given my family is just, it's indescribable. It's people need to know more about it. And when I say people, I mean women. Yeah. There's so many moms and people who are nurses and teachers who are in the exact same position as me. And so that
the interesting thing I wanted to touch on there is like women are just so much better socially than men. It's ridiculous. I can walk into an environment, right? And I'll analyze just a threat. For me, I'm like, I just quickly scan and be like, all right, who could potentially pose a threat, and be completely oblivious to any social clues. Whereas like my wife will walk into the same situation and she'll like completely get a very accurate read on everyone there. Just that intuition is absolutely ridiculous. The level of like the intuition that women have when it comes to social environments makes for, if more women can learn sales, like they could be phenomenal. Like men are gonna have to watch out as far as like their sales jobs go, because I think women are better sales professionals than men, to be completely honest.
Well, I mean, there's studies to back that up, but we won't. It's funny. I went on a podcast a few weeks ago, and the hosts were talking to me about their sales experience, and they were looking for somebody, they're wanting to get their website redone. And I think they had like 7 sales calls. 6 of them were with men, and they didn't go with any of them. They were just like there's just nothing that sort of wowed them about the conversation. They had one conversation with a woman, and that's who they signed up with. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't because she was a woman. It was because they genuinely felt like she cared about their best interests and understood exactly what they wanted.
Yep.
So it was just an interesting example and experience of like how sometimes women can make you feel.
People are always going to remember how you made them feel, right?
Yes.
And so if you can make people feel like you truly have their best interests at heart, right? They're going to pretty much do whatever you want them to do. Right? If they can trust that you have the best interest at heart, like you're somebody of integrity and that you genuinely have the best interest in mind, they're going to weigh your opinion way more heavily than somebody who may actually be better for them simply because they didn't make them feel like they were that important or that they cared, right?
Absolutely.
So She Sells teaches women how to start their sales career and get better at sales, learn the art of sales, learn the science of sales, and improve their conversions. Is it limited to just people wanting to begin a sales career, or can, let's say there's some women who are listening who are entrepreneurs and feel like they're struggling in sales? Is it something that they can get into?
Absolutely. So there's our the She Sells Launchpad, which is the fundamentals, but I'm a big believer in, you can always learn something from everybody. So I would still recommend coming in, doing the Launchpad, refreshing the fundamentals, the foundations. And then we have the accelerator program, which is for female entrepreneurs, people who are in sales and they want to elevate their sales game. That's for you. We do live coaching sessions. We have, honestly, just being in a community of women who are so driven and ambitious. It's electrifying in there.
Yeah.
They're just showing up every day. They're doing what it takes and seeing the transformations in all of the girls. Like I've had women who have come on and we do a role play and they can't even say hello. Like and now they're being placed as remote closers. Like the transformations and the growth that's happening within the container is it's amazing.
That's awesome. So if they want to enter your world, learn a little bit more about you, I have the website shesells.online. Awesome URL, by the way. It's very easy to remember.
Yeah.
And then where can they find you? How can they kind of get plugged into your world? Where can they find you on social?
So come and chat to me. She Sells with Brooke is my Instagram. I'm very approachable. I'm very open. I love voice notes. So yeah, jump into my DMs and start having a chat with me. So I see if I can help you. You could be anywhere in your sales career. You might be wanting to look for a different offer, a different home. Like that's also something that I can help you with. So just don't be a stranger. Just come and talk to me. Yeah. She Sells with Brooke. You can find me on Instagram.
We'll include that in the show notes. Well, Brooke, it's been absolutely amazing to have you. One thing I'd like to kind of close out with is, let's say, what's like the biggest lesson that you've learned over the last 12 months that you'd like to share with the audience?
Biggest lesson for me is progress over perfection. I wanted to fix everything at once. I wanted to get better at objection handling, and I wanted to connect with my prospects more, and I wanted to be more concise in my questioning, and I wanted to do all these things, and I started to try and do them all, and I literally got so overwhelmed that I actually lost sales because of it. So I wrote a list of all the things that I needed to improve on, and I worked with a mentor, and we one by one crossed them off. And it was the progress that I was looking for. Progress over perfection is the biggest thing. Like you need to celebrate the small wins, because even the challenges, like that's all opportunities for you to grow and reflect. So yeah, that's been my biggest piece of learning.
It's funny you say progress over perfection, because we have a saying that we use within our team. It's function over form. I like progress over perfection, like really. But it's essentially like very similar concept. It was like the goal is, instead of trying to make it look all pretty and get it perfect and get the form right, just get functional. Like just get like functional in this area and start making progress before you try and perfect it. Right. And then
that's exactly right. Imperfect action is always going to move the needle forward, and I just think I see so many women who are sitting on the fence. They're like, I really want this. And it's like, okay, so start making progress towards it. Don't worry about perfecting it yet. Just make the steps.
Yeah,
They're
waiting for everything to line up perfectly. And the timing is never going to be perfect. All right. So it's better to get started when you feel the most uncertain and the most insecure about taking that step, because that's really when you really need to start it, right? If you wait till it's perfect, there's never going to be perfect conditions. So Brooke, thank you so much for being on. For those guys who are listening, go to shesells.online if you want to learn how to sell and you want to start a sales career. But if you're also an entrepreneur and you want to get better, a female entrepreneur, want to get better at sales and improve your sales game, if you have a sales team, still go through that process, get into their accelerator program and get the ball rolling. Because I think there needs to be a lot more female sales professionals out there. Our best people have always been women, right? So they're hard to find because there's not a lot of you out there. So thank you, Brooke, for providing the service. She sells online. And that's where you're going to find her. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you found this helpful, go ahead and share and subscribe. Till next time, stay calm, change lives, and have business on your terms.